Hey, what's up guys? As you guys can see, I was looking up how to make audio work, but today I'm bringing you an unusual episode. I haven't uploaded for a long time, and sorry guys, that's just what happens when you go into a busy school term and you are trying not to completely blow it, which is what I usually do it, but I didn't do that this term. But now we're back, and we're going to play some Airway Sim, which is basically what I've been doing for fun during my school term. It's a really nice game because it's relaxing, it's not very active, and you can take a long break from it if you want, and it doesn't result in catastrophic failure like you do in Air Tycoon Online. I can take a 2-week break from this game, come back, and my airline will be handy dandy, where if you do that in Air Tycoon Online, you know, you won't be doing so well. Now, the only thing kind of regrettable about this game is the fact that it's not very visual, which doesn't make for great YouTube videos, which is why I might make these videos in a little bit more moderation, and basically spend more of the time making these videos just talking about the kind of things I'm looking to do in this game. Now, this is just a kind of one-off episode, but if you guys are interested, I could make a series on this game. Like, this is more of a world showcase. I'm just going to be playing this game a little bit. But yeah, there's a new world starting soon, which is basically like, you know, an opportunity, because I can or I cannot, you know, start a series based on if you guys want to see it or not. Because if, you know, even I get a couple comments, like I only get a couple comments a video, let's be real, but if I do get a couple that, you know, I'm just like, yeah, you'd be interested in playing or seeing me play this game, which, if you guys aren't familiar, this is Airway Sim. It's basically the most realistic airline simulator I have played so far. So, if you guys don't know, well, you guys definitely know because you're watching this channel. I love airline simulators. Like, Air Tycoon was a great game, and I would still play it if I had a continuous chunk of time to play it. But it has its major flaws. It's a little bit too stale in the sense you play it in the same way every time. And this game is also stale in the sense you play it in almost the same way every time. But there's still a lot more different ways you can do in this game, and the realism makes it so that even if you are still kind of just, in essence, repeating the same actions over and over and over again to make a very good airline, it doesn't feel as tedious because well, you're playing a more realistic game, which feels more accurate. This game is not even close to flawless, do not get me wrong. There are tons of unrealistic factors which don't really make sense to real life, but that is not the reason why you play games, right? Is to be 100% realistic to real life. You play them for fun, and that's exactly what I'm doing. So yeah, so as you guys can see right now, I'm just opening routes in my hub airport, LAX. This game is, again, it's highly realistic, but in the past I made a video, I believe, on the inaccuracies of this game. Apparently this is too far to fly direct, which is quite unfortunate. As you guys can see, the return leg is almost empty. Why does it say my 727s can't fly it? I'm pretty sure they can, so let me go ahead. There's no slots. Oh no. Okay, let's see at what time we can take off. So, in this game, I've been saying in this game a lot, but basically you can open flights whenever you want in the day, but the time matters. Flights which take off in extremely early or extremely late hours of the day are not very advantageous, where takeoff slots in moderate times of the day, so like, you know, like the morning, the afternoon, that kind of time, not like 3 a.m. Those flights are better. Now, the exact numbers are you want your flights to take off and land between, what is it? Just basically don't want it to be too close to midnight. That's basically what I'm saying now. As you guys can see, this has a little bit unfortunate spacing now. whatever. So basically, if your routes are scheduled too close together, so these routes are quite close together, for example, it increases the chance of delay. And of course, you don't really want delay. So yeah, there's kind of realisms like that. But there's also some unrealisms, and I'll talk about them in a sec. But yeah, as you can see, I'm just scheduling my aircraft now. This is just one aircraft, but as you can see, there's tons of routes I have to add. And this is because I'm doing something called 7-day scheduling. If you don't know what that is, just ignore it, and you might understand it by the end of this episode, though. That definitely deserves a video of its own if I ever decide to cover it in more detail, than kind of just willy-nilly throwing together a video on that now. For now, I'm just gonna keep on opening my good old routes. Now, I kind of want to make additional flights to these routes. Now, if you guys can see, the routes which I have added an additional flight to are kind of oversupplied. Like, for example, this is the day I've added an extra route. I'll just do a windows like you can see this bars a little bit higher. So basically what that means is I'm obviously going to be flying some empty seats around, which is not perfect. This bar is supply, this bar is demand. And these are the days of the week. As you guys can see, it's not the same. There's more demand on Monday than there is on Wednesday, which is, pretty accurate to real life. I'm not sure if Saturday and Sunday are accurate, but I believe they're not very popular among tourist or business travelers, so that was again pretty accurate. But yeah, basically what I'm saying is I'm trying to fly oversupply, kind of, even though I'm oversupplying myself, which, isn't ideal. But the reason I'm doing that is because I want to discourage anyone from adding a flight in addition to mine. I want to be the only people flying these routes. Demand will grow in due time. So yeah, even if it sacrifices efficiency, I think it's worth it. This needs to take off at 1740, but I don't think it's gonna fit. 2245. Yeah, that's a bit of a problem. So, as you guys can see, there's also curfews. So, what a curfew is an airport, as in real life, does not have to open the whole day. And unfortunately, high-low in where's that? Where's this? Where are we talking about? Hawaii is not open at that time. So instead, I'm gonna have to try and find a different time to take off and land. But we're seeing a little bit of a problem here. So my other flight to high-low is at 1640, and this works. But here's the problem: 1540 doesn't work because this arrival is too early. It's not a very popular time. But another issue is you do not want to take off and land too close to your other flights in terms of time, because it kind of shares the same demand pool. Now, being I'm probably going to be the only one to fly to this destination, it's okay to schedule 2 flights at almost the exact same time. But if you have competition, this is basically acting like both of your flights are one flight if you take off at the same time. So that's just a little thing to keep in mind. These 2 flights do have to take off at the same time, but I don't doubt anyone will notice. And I accidentally scheduled it for every day, which is a really big frustration because I do not want it every day. I in fact only want it for one day. Yeah, that's a bit annoying. So we're gonna have to go back there. Let me just get a little bit of a drink because I've been talking a lot. I'm sipping on some whiskey. Is a pretty good way to spend 1:30 a.m. So back to LAX, and we want to schedule 727. Yeah, this feels a little bit like spreadsheet simulator. I agree. If that's what you're thinking, I think that too. Unfortunately, that's what you pay for realism. So, plus you pay in real life dollars to play this game, which is another slightly unfortunate, shall we say, thing. Let me just add the flights for the other days. But like, what can you do? It's the price we pay for, once again, and I've repeated this a lot of times now, an accurate airline simulator. Now, see these, like Bluegrass. This is a demand route where I'm splitting demand quite evenly with somebody else. He's using a 737, so he's actually kind of got one up on me there, because as you can see, we're splitting demand 50-50 basically. It's almost perfect 50-50. He's using a 737 and I'm using a 727. Now, the 727 is significantly less efficient than a 737. So in general, you want to use the smallest plane possible to fly each available route. Is this always possible? Usually not. But we try anyways. Okay, this is a good time to mention this. So there's a really, really weird property in this game where you're only allowed 3 different types of aircraft. What do I mean by this is aircrafts have different type ratings, right? 737 is not the same plane as the A321neo. They're just not the same plane. If you want to fly those planes, you're gonna need a different license. You're gonna need different number of crews, slightly different amount. They're just slightly different planes, but like A380, A320, different planes. You get the point. But basically, what I'm saying, right, is the more fleet groups, as they call it in this game, you add, the higher your costs get per aircraft. It is a very, very strange phenomena. I don't believe real life works like that, but that is indeed what happens, and we have to work with it. So what that means is when you are scheduling aircraft, and I really have to change the turnaround time to 85 minutes as to not cause problems in the future. That was a random side thought. What was I talking about before? Oh yeah, fleet groups. So because this game, I don't want to call it arbitrarily, but I'm going to be real. It is completely arbitrarily increases your costs. Just because you have more fleet groups, you are basically restricted to 3 fleet groups. Any airline which grows large enough on more than 3 fleet groups will go bankrupt. And it's very odd because on exactly 3 fleet groups, it is fine. But passing that number, even just by like the 4 fleet groups, it becomes almost impossible to become a large airline. It's a very, very strange property of this game. One of the few major complaints I have. I'm really, really not a fan. But yeah, as I said earlier, we have to live with it. The other major inaccuracy to real life in this game that I consider to be a massive flaw is the fact that basically you are restricted the number of aircraft you can fly out of your main hub. Now, the reason why I find this to be a quite awful restriction is because it stops meaningful competition. And okay, yeah, what the fuck does meaningful competition mean? And basically what that does, what I mean by that is, because I can only have, say by the end of the game, I believe the number is around 1,500 aircraft outside of my base, but keep in mind that number increases over time, so it actually starts out very low. It starts out the game, believe I can only have like 300 aircraft or so out of my base, and the number increases over time, and that's just not enough. It's so little aircraft, in fact, that it's not enough to compete with people, because as I said, frequency wins in this game, as it is starting to do in real life too. People like point-to-point flying, and passenger transfers are not modeled in this game, and I can forgive that one because I myself have actually dabbled in trying to program passenger transfer modeling, and boy, it is not easy for something like, maybe an airline. Airlines obviously do it, but as somebody who's just casually trying to make a game to play, ooh, it's a bit tough. It's a bit tough. It's a lot of different variables go into there, and I wasn't really quite sure how to make it make sense. So I can for this game on not modeling passenger transfers, but because passenger transfers are not modeled, That basically means if you want to get market share, you basically need a frequency, because it splits the passengers based on some factors, but one of them is just the number of flights, so you want to have more flights to split the passengers among your flights. But that kind of comes at the cost of needing a lot of smaller aircraft. Instead of flying one A380 to a destination with a lot of demand, we fly 3 or 4 737s, as like happens in real life. That's what happens in real life. Most airlines fly multiple frequencies of smaller aircraft instead of one frequency of a larger one, because of the economics of the way people buy tickets, so the fact that people need to go at different times, and there's just not usually enough demand to support a large aircraft for one airline, especially since there's only one takeoff time, where some people might sometimes need to use different takeoff times. So yeah, basically I just gave a really long-winded explanation too long-winded in fact, that frequency wins in this game. And because of the out of base limit, you can't really use frequency to beat anybody in this game at the same time. It's the best, but you can't use it because you're going to be out of base aircraft. Down in your main base, of course, you can still take full advantage of the economics of this game and completely destroy your opponents. But that's just, unfortunately, not the case everywhere else, basically. Besides your main base, you want to not fly the biggest aircraft possible, but you want to focus your efforts on slightly larger aircraft, that's for sure. And that's what I'm like. A lot of my strategies are planned around that. I'll give you an example. Combi aircraft are particularly interesting in this game. Now, in real life, they're phased out due to safety issues and other reasons that I'm actually not too sure of. But in this game, like combi aircraft aren't particularly great originally, but recently in an update they added combi aircraft which were able to carry in this game what is classified as heavy cargo. Now that means you can have in cargo heavy bases, for example LAX and all the New York bases carry a decent amount of cargo, being next to cities which I guess are supposed to be productive. I'm not really sure how the cargo system works in this game. I'm gonna be honest here. But yeah, basically what I'm saying is combi aircraft are a great way to replace two aircraft, because they're basically one freighter and one passenger aircraft in one aircraft. And I've been using that fact a lot in some other game worlds to try and eke out an advantage over my competitors. How well has it worked? Meh is how well it worked, but I mean, we have the chance to, well, like try it out. It's not the most profitable thing in the world, but it's probably the most profitable per aircraft you can get, but not as a percent. And it's kind of like extremely debatable whether percentage margin in this game is better over full margin, because it's kind of like a risk versus reward. In this game, of course, you can't go bankrupt, as you know you'd expect from an airline simulator. But you also want to place highest on the scoreboard. Now, the highest places on the scoreboard are rewarded by profitability, profit margin, number of passengers, and number of cargo flow. Those are some of the biggest factors, which can vary drastically around companies. Like, there's other factors like company image, which are very similar from airline to airline. I mean, almost all the major airlines by the end of the game will have extremely good company image, and that kind of thing. But not all of them will have, you know, a lot of cargo or a lot of passengers. Some airlines focus on cargo, some airlines focus on passengers. And yeah, basically what you end up with is you want to have all stats high, but you can't really have that all the time. You have to sacrifice something. If you cover the most demand, say you fly the most passengers, that probably means you're flying some passengers less efficiently. I'll give you an example. I want to open another route here. It'll mean I get 2/3 of the demand and my competitor gets 1/3 of the demand. It would mean my margin is lower than somebody else in some other base, splitting the demand 50-50 in his base. So his margin would be higher, even though our incomes might be similar. And I would be flying more passengers, where he would have the same or higher income with a higher margin. So there's trade-offs to be made basically no matter what you do. And I mean, this route has quite a bit of demand, so I think I'll add a third flight. Charleston, why not? I'm really trying to kind of force bankruptcies as well. Whenever I see a weaker airline who's making obvious scheduling mistakes or other factors, I will always try and push my lead and cause bankruptcy. And basically how I do that is I take a look at their routes without a lot of competition and I add competing flights. Now, because I am one of the largest airlines that is currently flying, of course it doesn't affect my bottom line very much. I'm also very smart about what kind of aircraft I use. For all shorter range routes, I'll use medium-sized aircraft, and medium-sized aircraft in this game are 70 to 100 seats. So small regional jets, basically, and of course that does extremely well on the frequency, which I was talking about earlier, and kind of wins me a lot of market share really easily, even though they're not making a lot of money per aircraft. I'm losing the competitors more money. That's great. That's exactly what I want. So yeah, I mean, that's basically the strategies I've been using. I've been trying to lower enemy margins while increasing my own, and eventually you force bankruptcies of weaker airlines. I'll give you an example of some as soon as I'm done this scheduling. 2110. Just repeating the time I need to schedule this for out loud so I don't forget, and make sure that's in all good times. And as you can see, it is. So let's go ahead and open that up. And yeah, as you can see, we're adding a lot of flights to places I'm already flying, just trying to increase my market share a little, trying to grab more demand, even though it's might not be the most profitable. It should be decently profitable because I have very, very high company image. As I said, most really good airlines by the end of the game will have high company image, but this is quite early in a game. I have like 320 aircraft, but that's honestly in this game standards quite early, so I want to take off at 12:05. Now what I'm doing is basically I'm trying to space my flights by at least an hour so the takeoff times are staggered. I'm not sure if I mentioned that or not earlier. Just make sure I'm getting ideal load factors. Now, as you can see, we've fully scheduled this one plane. There's little gaps here and there, but they're too small to fit any reasonable flights into. So what do we do now? Now, once you have your flights scheduled as such, you've probably realized this already, but I'll give you an example. KISB. This flight is only once a week. As you can see, I already fly these other 5 days, which is why you can see there's some supply, but there's double the supply on this day, so obviously I'm flying once more in this day. Well, that was the one flight you saw I added, but I want to add it on all the days. Now, I could use one plane and fly here 7 times a week on that one plane, but that would leave a lot of space where the plane is sitting around, so instead, I add a whole bunch of different routes to one plane, and then this is what I do. I copy that schedule 1 day forward, which is basically what I'm doing now, and then I add that to the plane, to the next plane. So now, as you guys can see, like Seattle, JFK, Charleston, Philadelphia, I think this is, no, Honolulu, my bad. They all kind of line up except one day staggered, and this is called 7-day scheduling, and it's extremely useful for making sure you get the demand covered evenly per day without wasting any of your aircraft's time, because of course you really don't want to be doing that. Time is money, as they say, so we can't be wasting any of that. Yeah, I forgot one route from that page, so go ahead and add all these routes in. Now this is the most tedious part of the game. Adding your routes in, it's quite time consuming, and it's easy to misclick, add the wrong route, that kind of stuff. Then you gotta schedule your maintenance checks, which is another thing, which of course, what's that game called? Air Tycoon does not have. There's no such thing as like maintenance checks. You just pay maintenance costs. And there's A checks, B checks, D checks, and C checks, as there is in real life. Now, D checks are enormous projects. They're basically almost a reconstruction of the entire plane, and they're hugely expensive. I'm talking a D check can be more than the value of a plane when it's old. Of course, when it's new, it's still quite worth it to D-check the plane. But a lot of people plan their entire strategies around these maintenance checks. For example, to fly a plane until it's 14 years old and then return it to leasing companies, or sell it, or just even scrap it to avoid the next D-check. It depends. Sometimes you're able to sell it, sometimes you're not. But basically, the D-checks get massively expensive early on. Later on, the first one is relatively cheap as the plane is newer, less things need to be replaced. But as the plane ages, the D-checks, which are once again the most expensive maintenance check, gets more. That's odd. I swear there should be 4 Tampas, no? There are only 3. Okay. Oh, I remember. That was the day where there was not enough slots. Okay, yeah. That makes sense. Yeah, slot restrictions are a slightly frustrating thing to deal with, but it's realistic. I'm a really big fan of slot restrictions in this game, actually. They provide a lot of interesting gameplay. Basically, they can be annoying too, because you might want to start an airport but it has no slots, and making it impossible to compete with airlines already there. But that is something which can happen in real life too. So even though it can be frustrating in game, I understand its purpose, and I'm not unhappy about its existence. I really don't know what day of Tampa I should put in, so I'm just gonna add in all the other flights and then figure that out. But it also creates interesting strategies in the sense that there are actually situations where you don't go for frequency. Let's say you are an airline based in Heathrow. That might actually be a situation where you do not want to go for... this is not correct. That might actually be a situation where you don't want to go for frequency. The 767-200 is the smallest plane which can fly long distances, which is, the bread and butter of Heathrow long haul demand. But if you do that, you're going to run out of slots before you fill all the demand. So normally people go for a slightly larger plane in the A330. Now, in real life, people go for planes that are even quite a bit bigger than the A330. We got A380s and stuff in real life flying into Heathrow. And why is there like a missing route there? I can't quite figure out what's supposed to be there. Okay, let's see. What's after Tampa? Honolulu. Do I have multiple Honolulus in here? Honolulu. Oh, this will have. By the way, this usually takes me about a minute to add in all the flights. But because I'm talking, it's taking up enough of my mental capacity, so apparently it's very difficult to add these flights. Yeah, but what was I saying? I was saying something about who cares? But oh yeah, I was talking about London Heathrow, and the fact that yeah, in London Heathrow you sometimes don't want to use the smallest plane possible, and that's what slot restrictions do. It also creates the fact that you can make protectable demand, and this is kind of debatable whether you think it's a good thing or not, because protectable demand is like, if you are the first person to fly all the demand and then all these slots are used up, your demand becomes protected in a sense. Nobody else can serve it, even if they want to. And I'll give you a really good example of how that can go kind of horribly wrong. This is, oh no, that's not the correct game world. Modern times. Oh yes, this is the correct game world, my bad. Modern times. In this world, as you guys can see, here are the top players. Now, this player and these players are just, you know, decent players. This is me. I was actually one of the biggest guys in this world, and I got bored, and I quit the airline basically deliberately. But this was, and the reason is because I realized I could never catch the #1 player, which is my original goal. And because I couldn't do it, you know, might as well do something else which I find more fun than what I was doing, which was short haul demand and cargo demand. Instead, I'm doing long haul passengers out of London now. But this guy has enormous profits, 16 billion a quarter, which is just vastly unrealistic. 60% more than this guy, and this guy has much lower margins, Infinity. So when the fuel price goes back up, and it is very, very low right now, he will go back down to about 3-4 billion USD a turn, and this guy will still be around 10 billion USD a turn. So he's making basically double anybody else. If we take a look at airline stats, his value is almost double the next guy as well, and it's just because he has LAX in a stranglehold. LAX is one of the biggest hubs in the world. Huge amount of cargo and passengers go through this airport. And the problem is, you can still compete on cargo, but he's flying one of the most efficient planes you can, which is actually the 757 of all things for a lot of the cargo demand. But there's no slots in this crucial time, or very little. There used to be less. These time slots used to be completely occupied. Now there are actually a few available, as there was recently the bankruptcy of the last competitor to this guy, and there's only 20, so you can only fit about 20-30 flights before these slots are gone again, whereas you can see normal hours is about 100. And because there's no slots in these hours, and you might say, what's the big deal? It's one of the only times you can take off to the East Coast and land at a nice time in the day. And that's why for hubs based on the West Coast of the United States, you absolutely need those slots. And without them, you end up with kind of monopolies like that. And see, Air Obamacare. My aircraft or airline naming might not be very good, but basically it's called Air Obamacare because I thought about California and what was interesting about California, and I couldn't think of anything except for the fact that they usually overwhelmingly win Democratic vote. So for that kind of silly reason, I chose to make my airline called Air Obamacare. I mean, there's really no rhyme or reason into my thinking. I am a strange person. But that's how I function. So, anyways, I'm gonna schedule a 7-day schedule here now. Actually, no. I will do another 7-day schedule in a different world, and I'll do a long haul 7-day schedule. I already did one LAX. I'm based in LAX in 2 worlds. As you guys can see, I'm a big sucker for the biggest hubs in the world. Another thing you might have noticed is, if you remember me playing Air Tycoon, I was an enormous sucker for London Heathrow, because once again, it is still the biggest passenger hub in the world in this game. I know in real life, by passenger volume, I think it's Atlanta, narrowly, sometimes Chicago, sometimes London Heathrow. I haven't really been keeping up with it, but you have to remember that Chicago and Atlanta are both short haul hubs. Freaking Chad ass London Heathrow out here being a long haul hub with more demand. And why I find that extremely impressive is because think about it this way. One plane can fly between Chicago and New York, I don't know, 4 or 5 times a day. How many times can a plane fly between London and New York in a day? Like 1.3 times. Like you could fly like, not even. I think you could only fly there 1 time a day. Which is why 5,000 demand long haul is a ton more than 5,000 demand short haul. Which is what makes London Heathrow extremely fun. It's basically the only hub in the entire world where there's more long haul demand than short haul demand, and you can just fill it. And there's also in this game world a enormous bankruptcy out of London Heathrow, and because of that fact, I have gone straight into 767s. Now, oh god, these routes ran out of slots. Hold up. Yeah, you can lose slots if your route is not flown for too long. That's just a mistake on my part that usually doesn't happen. So let's go ahead. You just have to like refresh the routes, and your airline will buy the slots for you again. So now we own all those slots. It's kind of annoying because London Heathrow slots are not cheap. The way slots work in this game, by the way, maybe I should mention this, is they don't cost. Seems I have some planes without routes added on, so let's go ahead and add those on first before we start scheduling. What was I saying? Right. So, wait, no, I forgot. Oh yeah, I mentioned it previously that you don't want to necessarily go for the smallest planes possible in a hub, like in London Heathrow, and that's exactly what I did. But the reason is, 767s are very, very nice airplanes. This game is in 2016, so at this point in time, they're now extremely cheap, like $50-60 million for a new one, and extremely cheap to lease, $200,000 a week for a plane that's of course very, very cheap, and they're still surprisingly efficient. In fact, in real life, I believe they're still getting a solid number of orders. Let's check this actually. 767 orders. Believe Wikipedia has this. Oh yeah, here we go. Yeah, they're still getting a solid number of orders. As you guys can see, there's been a solid backlog for basically the entire life of this plane. Almost, I think it's at 1,200 produced now. Very, very nice indeed. And the reason for that is because they're so damn cheap. They don't in real life they're cheap. They're still efficient. Like I think the 787 is like 20%, something like that, more efficient per passenger. But it's like half the price. At least in this game it is. I'm not sure about real life actually. But in this game it is so much cheaper. I'm like, you can't realistically start with expensive planes. And the reason being is you start with leased aircraft. And if you're leasing expensive aircraft, you're not going to live long. That is a guarantee. So instead of leasing expensive planes, let's lease some cheap planes. Get a fast start. And then what we can do once we've gotten a solid, good start to the game is we can branch out. And we can actually move these schedules to larger planes. Say A350-800. It's 20% larger, something like that. And uses the same amount of fuel. It needs a little bit more cabin crew, so a little bit more expensive on staff. Same price on fuel, carry some more passengers. You get a little bit more demand that way. But, I mean, at the same time, I could stay with 767 to the end of the game. There's lots of slots in London this round because of a recent major bankruptcy. Which is very, very unusual for London, by the way. If we take a look at the... Oops, that's not what I want to look at. Do not want to look at the route map. The slot distribution. As you can see, there's slots at all times of the day, and lots of them, even in the morning. which are extremely valuable times. It's the second most valuable time in London, 13 to 14, and 30 slots, but that's still 30 something flights at that time. That's a lot of aircraft. So we can basically, what I'm saying, I'm very long-winded with these kind of things, is we can fit a lot more aircraft into London Heathrow. That's exactly what I intend on doing. We're gonna squeeze as many aircraft as we can out, and when we run out of slots, what we're gonna do is we're gonna replace 767 with a larger model of aircraft. I'm currently looking at A350s, which, by the way, A350s are remarkable. A350s sip fuel. So daintily sip fuel. And they carry a very large amount of passengers to an enormous range. Very amazing. I know I'm like jerking off this the A350 really hard in this game, but I'm not as big of a fan as the 787. I'm not saying the 787 is a bad plane, but the 787 is the same price, just basically equivalently efficient per passenger, but it carries slightly few passengers for the same price airframe. And I'm already being priced out of these airframes, like, especially because I just started in this world. As you can see, these are all my aircraft here. It's probably 20. Hardly any aircraft. And it'll be probably what feels like forever until I can afford aircraft like new, and 300 million per frame. For A340s, it's just going to be ridiculous. I'm not sure if I'll ever be able to afford it. As you guys can see here, what I'm doing is I'm spacing my routes by 30 minutes instead of the 1 hour I was doing before, and that's the reason there's extremely high demand on London to New York, and that's the reason why I'm making sure that the routes are spaced out nicely. Another thing you might have noticed is I'm flying to the same destination repeatedly instead of spreading out my destinations, and the reason why I'm doing that is because there's something called route image in this game. I haven't talked about it yet, but route image basically determines the proportion of the demand you can get. That's the easiest way to explain it, and at zero route image you can get at most 30% of a route's demand, and obviously because you start with zero route image, I want to use the routes where I already have route image because I've been flying them for a while, like JFK to LAX, and I want to take advantage of that fact and fly there until the demand is quite saturated. That is one of the better ways to expand. There are tons of routes. For example, almost every major US city, every major Asian city to London has a ton of demand. Yet I'm just doing New York and LAX because, first of all, it has just so much demand, like 10,000 seats a day. I'm quite sure that's quite a bit higher than in real life. But this game kind of adjusts for how many people are in the world. So if there's more, like 400 people when the world starts, there's obviously less now. It's going to make demand numbers much higher so that people can have fun and play the game, which is, I think, a really good touch. I feel like if every game had the same amount of demand, no matter the number of players who wanted to join in, it just wouldn't be fun. It'd be too many people competing over the same things, and it wouldn't work. On another note, I'm out of cash, which is really sad because I want to open more routes, but we're gonna have to wait for my puny little income to make myself some money. Now, as you see, aircraft maintenance is currently a huge proportion of my income. That is not normal. Aircraft maintenance is usually a much smaller slice. Okay, that's this week. Let's go with week 16. Yeah, okay. Okay, actually, let's put on monthly. this should be easier to illustrate. So in the last month, operating profit, operating expenses is what I'm trying to look at. Is aircraft maintenance a third? It's not a third. It's usually like that tiny 7% slice, which we saw earlier. And the reason for this is because I'm redoing my cabin configurations. London Heathrow is not only one of the only long-haul hubs in the world in terms of having more than domestic. It's also the one of few premium long-haul hubs. So you can fly a remarkable amount of business passengers, like, what is this? 4,000 business passengers out of 20,000 passengers a week for me. And if we take a look at my income, 9,000 USD above negative, business tickets account for, and first tickets account for half my income, which is highly unusual. Usually business and first class seats are almost an afterthought. So yeah, I mean, that's basically what I wanted to do. It's been pretty long, my voice is starting to dry out, so hopefully you guys enjoyed this extremely long-winded episode. It's been pretty fun. If you guys are interested in seeing more Air Tycoon and perhaps a series in a new world where I base out of Atlanta, a lot of the other I'll show you guys. So this is a Discord kind of for my alliance, and if we take a look at this, why is this not like, oh god damn it. I don't know how to use Discord, I'm gonna be real. Okay, now that I've embarrassed myself, we'll end the episode there. But yeah, basically a lot of bases have been claimed. Atlanta is the best one, which hasn't. Hopefully you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you guys next time.